If God needed help, would you help him? I'd be like, well, God doesn't need help. I mean, that's what makes him God. He doesn't need anyone to help him. But okay, set that aside for a moment. If God was in need, would you help him? You might say, well, I don't have anything that could help God. I mean, if God's asking me for help, oh man, we are in trouble. But let me come back to that question. Or maybe let me phrase it using language that we've been using the last few weeks here at the well. If God was in need of welcome, would you welcome him? Welcome. This is the series that we have been in, the conversation about what it means to value, notice, prioritize, move towards with compassion and love those who are in need. What it means for us to practice radical hospitality, to welcome others into our lives, both in a community, as a faith community, but even more importantly, as Jesus people, for any of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, out in the world where we are. And even if you're new here today, or perhaps you're exploring faith, that idea is probably not strange to you to think, yeah, that would be good if the community of Jesus followers were that kind of people to each other and in the world, in our workplaces, in our schools, in our families, in a world that feels increasingly difficult, hostile, or isolated. What would it mean for us to be people of welcome who notice, value, and prioritize others? And so let me come back to the question. If God was someone who needed to be seen and noticed and valued and prioritized and moved towards with compassion and help to serve in his time of need, would you do it? I mean, me, I'm like, I better. I mean, it's God. He better help that man, right? Or I might say, yeah, I would want to. I sing songs about loving God and worshiping him and being grateful to him for his love for me. So yes, if he was in need, I would want to help him. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, like it totally should, right? Help a brother out, it goes well for you. Imagine helping God out. That could really go well for you. If God was in need, would you help him? If God was in need of welcome, would you welcome him? It's not as strange a question as it first sounds. And in fact, it's far more important to us than we realize. I'm not just messing with you, making up kind of strange questions about this. This is something Jesus actually brought to our attention. Now, first and foremost, you just need to relax, just take a breath out. God is not dependent on you. I mean, that would be very scary to be in a codependent relationship with the supreme being of the universe, where I needed him and he needed me. That would not be good. That's not what we're talking about. But in another sense, it's possible that God is right in front of us in need of welcome. This is exactly what Jesus said to his disciples, to his followers. And I want to look at this passage, this conversation, that we can't talk about welcome without talking about this passage, this conversation that Jesus had. We can't do a series like this without getting to this point. And to make us realize why this is actually not a strange question at all, and it actually is very profound and important for us to realize and wrestle with. It comes, this conversation, at the end, kind of the end of Jesus' public ministry, when he's talking to his disciples about what things will be like, in a sense, at the end of all things, at the end of this world as we know it. And Jesus, in a sense, is going to describe to his followers what he will see when he looks back on our lives in this life and what it means for him. And so here's what he's saying. He's describing what these end of days might look like. And listen to the significance of this conversation. This is in Matthew 25, verses 31 to 40. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, this is the return, the great return of Jesus to the earth, and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. In other words, enter into the gift, the reward. For what? For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality? Hospitality, bing, bing, bing. That should go off in your mind there. Or naked and give you clothing. When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did that for one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Friends, there are some passages that we read in Scripture and even in the teachings of Jesus that maybe are a little bit confusing and that we need a lot of explanation for because they happened 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago in a different time and culture and were written or spoken in Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic and translated, and so there's some stuff lost in translation. This isn't, I don't think, one of those passages. I think it's actually pretty clear. You know what I see very clearly? This is most certainly about welcome, about offering food and clothing and a warm place and friendship and care and visitation and love and compassion to people in obvious need. This is about welcome, no doubt. And it's so interesting, isn't it, that this is a passage about the end of days when Jesus will look back on life, and for him, what was most important? What did he see? This isn't some minor little side conversation. This is at the end of all things, Jesus says, this is what I will think about when I look back on your life in this world as my followers. And it is about welcome. Secondly, what is so obvious and clear is that Jesus is so close to those who are in need. He, in a sense, he's describing how much he identifies with people who feel poor, who are in need of clothing, who are hungry, who are lonely, who are destitute, who are sick, who are suffering, who are in prison, incarcerated, and it doesn't say why they are in prison. It doesn't say wrongly imprisoned. It just says in prison and needing friendship, needing to know they weren't alone. Jesus says, I so identify with people like that. He's saying it's like when they are in need, he is in need. Like when they are hungry, he is hungry. When they are naked, he is naked. When they are sick, he is sick. When they are a stranger, he feels like a stranger who needs welcome. When they are in prison, it's like he is in prison. I mean, that is just so clear from this passage. Not only is this about welcome, but Jesus identifies himself so closely with people who are in needs like that. And this is not an exhaustive list of needs, just kind of everyday needs that are all over the place in every city, in every part of the world. And thirdly, what is so clear is Jesus says to welcome them is to welcome God. To welcome them is to welcome God. And we say to welcome, right, is to notice, prioritize, value, move towards, use love and compassion to help those in need. He says to do that to them is to do that for God, the King. Whenever you welcome someone like that in need, whenever you move towards them, whenever you value them, whenever you notice them, whenever you use what you have to help them in their need, you are doing that for God. You may not realize that's what's happening, but Jesus is saying that's what's happening. You may not think it is something big or profound, but Jesus does. Whenever you notice and value and prioritize, you're doing that for him. And then I didn't read the rest of the passage because we don't have time for it today, but he actually describes the negative other side of that. Whenever you ignore someone in need, whenever you move past someone in need, whenever you are oblivious to someone in need, whenever you refuse to use what you could do in help of others, you are ignoring, oblivious to, moving past, refusing to help, he says, me. This is the great implication of this. These are the things that is obvious, but the question is this, what's Jesus describing? Is he saying, is this like some Jesus in disguise? Like he's mysteriously kind of playing this trick where, aha, it was me all along. You know, you thought you were helping this person, but aha, it was me. I don't think that's what he's saying. I actually think he's saying something far more profound and powerful. This is Jesus choosing to identify himself with people in need. In other words, taking those people by the hand and elevating the status of those who are in great need to a God-like level. This is Jesus choosing to say, the people that I feel most comfortable with, the people that I most relate to in this world, the people in need of food and shelter and clothing and friendship and love and healing and visitation and empathy and compassion and kindness. He said, those are the people that I feel most like. And he says, to help them is to help me. In other words, I want you to see them like you would see me. I want to raise their value in your eyes to a God-like level. These are the people in this world that I most identify with. If we were ever in doubt that welcome matters to Jesus, this should put it to rest forever. That all the way through the conversations in Jesus' life and his teaching and all the way through his biographies from beginning to end. In fact, over these weeks, we've covered so many of those different stories. This is about the good news of Jesus, someone who welcomes and moves towards and notices and prioritizes and values the poor and the oppressed and the forgotten and the lonely and the hungry and the incarcerated. And Jesus says, I most associate with people like them. I don't want you to miss for a moment the God-like value that these people have, the ones that is so easy to devalue or ignore or walk past. And we've been talking about this all the way through the beginning of this year, but definitely as we head into today, which is the kickoff to our Live on Mission week. Live on Mission is the time of year where we as a church focus or double down on the fact that Jesus is on a mission in this world to bring this kind of healing and hope and help and renewal and restoration, and that he invites us to join him in his mission, that we can live on mission with him. And we do that individually, and we've been talking about that through our hospitality challenge, our 30 days of welcome, but also communally, locally in each of our sites and globally around the world. And that's what Live on Mission Week is about. In each of our sites, God has entrusted us with partners who are working directly, particularly with marginalized or exploited women. People who would fall in this category that Jesus says we need to see with God-like status in terms of the value we place on them. And God has given us 3 incredible partners, one in each of our sites. And I'm going to actually turn it over to our site pastor, who's going to be in a conversation with them for the rest of this morning of how they are helping us do this better as a church and what it means for us to see them in the same way that we would value and see God, that when they are in need, it's like he is in need. And when we move towards them to help them, we are moving towards him because Jesus has associated himself with people like this to raise the status and the value of them in our eyes so that we would welcome them just like we would welcome